Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aaron Zetner. I'm the Dean of Institutional Effectiveness, which encompasses research, analytics, accessibility, planning, and grant development at Coastline College. I am here with my friend and colleague, Eric Cooper,
Hey everybody, Eric Cooper, Dean of Planning, Research, and Resource Development at Sierra College.
and we're here today to just give you a short talk where our talk will be a conversation between us, really discussing the impact of culture and how it can facilitate change. So, with further ado, we're just going to get right into our conversation. So we want to look at change through two different lenses. So change can occur typically through a planned approach. Now, with a planned approach, a lot of the times it's very structured, very strategic. Everybody's coming together, and in theory, it's a cross-functional and collaborative set of activities to help develop out a vision with specific outcomes and benchmarks to meet along the way. Now, unplanned change really occurs when decisions have to be made on the fly. For example, when we had a COVID-19 and there was a large transition for institutions to go to remote learning environments, remote working environments, how we are connecting with our students differently and engaging across a variety of levels. A lot of the times with unplanned change, decisions are made very urgently, they're reactive, and there may not be that luxury of time to have a long-term strategic plan developed out. But with that, in short-term planning, you can make quick decisions which can lead to short-term wins, but then also you can learn from that along the way. So really looking at the variety of things that lead to changes and the decisions to move forward. And so we really looked at a quadrant of different areas that impact that. And so one of the first quadrants is technology. So as things start evolving, emerging, changing over time, one of the biggest impacts that we're seeing is there's a phenomena called a FOMO, of a fear of missing out. And what that means is individuals may want to feel that they're falling behind, they're not relevant, they're not at the front of the line as far as being attractive and being more efficient, being operationally effective, and then also just being collaborative with the new and the great technology that emerges. So that's technology and a lot of factors associated with why individuals may want to change. So once again, to just summarize that, the betterment of your institution, looking to how you can serve students better, be more efficient, effective, and like I said, just be more relevant. And so those are some factors that technology brings into why individuals or institutions are looking to change. And
We're
then
talking about regional effects, much like technology. There are regional catalysts for change, and some of those may be shifts in labor market. Some of them are fires, right? Some of those are things that we're going to see coming, and some we're just going to have to react to. I think of sort of Butte College dealing with the Camp Fire, Santa Rosa, recently Solano, many others, right? How do we adapt to that change that's really going to affect a small region without necessarily a lot of planning?
I agree. And I think Eric really touched on a lot of things where a lot of these changes, such as regional, are out of our control. Things just occur, such as COVID-19, the fires, things that may, like I said, may not be planned. And those would fall under sometimes the unplanned change. And then we want to look at kind of societal impacts. You know, what happens with things such as the election, what happens with shifts in the cultures, shifts in preferences, the demand of on time and in real time for everything, and a change of expectancy within different generations and student populations by which we serve and the communities by which we serve. I think that really takes a strong impact on how our behavior and our ideals of change really move forward.
And then definitely, and then obviously, along with societal changes, we often see regulatory changes that are either a direct reaction to it or trying to contain or change society in a specific way. For the community colleges, good example of that recently, AB 705. If you're at a CSU, Executive Order 1100, those made changes that impacted what we could do. Now, most of that we had a little bit of time. We didn't have to be reactive, but it was still something that was an external impetus for that change. So, all good things.
Definitely. Great example, Eric. So when we go about change and what we're thinking about with change, as we start exploring through these not just different quadrants of what leads to change, but what leads to effective change, just reading through a variety of different books, texts, and just finding common themes throughout literature, it all tied back to really three common areas, which really looked at your core, the core of your institution, the core of your leadership, the core of your employees, the core of your community you serve. And so when looking at that, we look at the values. What really guides our behaviors and decisions? And really, I think Eric has a really good perspective with this that he'll share in a bit about with values for equity and how we share. There's different perspectives on that, and but really think about what the values are driving your institution and the stakeholders, the communities you serve, the students you work with, the lives you impact, really looking at the work that you do and then what how that shapes the decisions you make, and then also tying over to your purpose. I think one of the biggest things is, why are you here? Sometimes what we've seen with mission statements, because of regulations with accreditation and the like, they become very what would you almost say, very just basic. They just follow, they check the boxes, they say yes we do this, yes we do that, but sometimes they may lose some of their depth. And one of the things that we struggled with a lot at the institution at Coastline where I'm at is, how do we make the mission statement very meaningful and really trying to make it last as well. We used to have a review process that took every 2 years. We would review the mission statement. One year it took so long, it took over 2.5 years to get it reviewed. And what we came out with was just a giant bullet list where it was great ideas, but no one could even mention it or get behind it, which while in the intentionality was good and it was mirroring where our values are, it just may not have been able to speak directly. It could roll off your tongue. I think for us, where we landed was with our latest one, where we involved a variety of stakeholders, including students, community members, and like, is we landed on a mission statement that's much shorter, but really tied around a concept of meeting students where they are. And that really tied back to our values of equity, and to say, it's not just where they are at a distance, but where they are educationally, where they are with access, where they are educationally, occupationally. There's so many varying levels that we were able to tie back to our services, to our instruction, to ensure that was really blended into that. And it's been a really important driver in support of our pathways and equity work at Coastline. And I don't know, Eric, would you like to share some of the
Actually, I want to cycle back to the mission statement a little bit, because at Sierra College we had kind of a similar experience. Generally, mission statements would take us a long time to develop. We'd review them every year, at least give them a cursory, look at them. But as a result of some of the specificity for a while within accreditation standards, we literally one time highlighted and color coded how our mission statement aligned to that specific standard in accreditation. And it was actually really refreshing when accreditation didn't change the standard, but changed their interpretation of the standard, because it let us get back to something that was a more natural mission statement. It didn't feel like a big checklist. And I'd like to add, if I can, and I'm going to, with relation to accreditation, one of the core values that we have for Sierra College, I'm just going to literally read it, and my apologies for that, but support and model excellence and innovation in teaching, learning, scholarship, and creativity. Again, core value for Sierra College. And so when we talk about accreditation, I think one of my favorite things that we've done recently in knowing that core was we introduced accreditation to the campus, what our process was going to be for collecting feedback, writing our institutional self-evaluation report through a musical at Convocation. It was Accreditation 2019, The Musical. It was 2 hours. We got the president involved. We got our vice presidents, our academic senate presidents. It was a lot of fun. And it really showed both who we were and then how we committed to some of our other core values. And so it was a lot of fun. So just knowing who you are and sticking with that.
And I think that's a great component. And when we were looking at things, as I kind of mentioned that you and I spoke about earlier prior to our presentation today, is really looking at the question of equity, where people are using it either as a core value or as a strategic value. And I thought that was a really great insight you brought forward, is either way, you're really serving the students. But I don't know if you wanted to expound on that a little bit more, but I thought that was really insightful.
Yeah, well, it was like I can't take credit for that. I got that from Veronica Kiefer Lewis, who is helping do some work with the RP group, and she presents all over in the community colleges. She's great, but um, your approach in the work, between, is equity a core value? Is it kind of in your heart, or is it a strategic value? I think is an important discussion for you all to have. The end result might end up being the same, but the intentionality, the purpose behind those discussions, behind that change is very, very different. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about intentionality a little bit later, but that's something at Sierra College that we're still kind of wrestling with, because we do have folks that only see equity as a strategic goal. We're going to accomplish it because that's the thing we need to do right now. And then we've got others on campus who, that is who they are, that's what they live. And if we are not committed because it is the right thing to do, then that any commitment less than that is not enough. And so
And I
as a community, we're trying to figure that out between all of our stakeholders.
And I think really in a way you can shape that, and I'll give you an example of what we did with related to equity before we started our pathways work, really was interesting is we had a mandatory college, 3-day college training for every employee, including the part-time faculty, which everyone was paid to come in, but we had mandatory 3-day equity and inclusion training that everyone had to meet. It was probably about a total of, I don't know, 15 to 20 hours of training. It was very in depth, very real conversations, but it started us out on the right path and really helped shape and rethink our core, our values, and who we were before we were taking on an institutional initiative that was really looking to be transformative for the whole institution. So I think, like I said, as we wrap this up, is really knowing your core. Like Eric said, understanding your values. Who are you serving? Who are you looking to serve? And what is that purpose? And how does that really tie together? Because once you have that locked in, it's very easy to really siphon through the decisions you need to make and help everyone get behind that. So I'm going to pass it over to Eric to talk a little bit about theory behind this.
Absolutely, because it wouldn't be a professional conference such as CARE without bringing in a theoretical framework. And so I was introduced to this by Dr. Nathan Tharp, who got his completed his work just about a year or so before Aaron and I, and got to sit on his dissertation and really appreciated this model. And this is not the most recent version of this model, but it gets to the different components that are important in considering the interaction of culture with creating an outcome. And these are all aspects of culture. The tools that we use. Are you a Canvas school or a Blackboard school? Are you using Moodle? What's your ERP, right? Those are all different tools that we potentially use. Do we use paper forms or do we use PDF, right? Different aspects. At least for higher ed, we typically have the same subject in terms of students, and the object is their education. And the outcome really is going to be successful graduates, right? Or successful work outcomes, et cetera. The community that we're working in, it's the faculty, it's the classified staff, it's the students themselves, the rules that we all have to work in. Those are all important in understanding how our culture works, because every one of our schools, we are, assuming that you work at a college or university, we're all looking for those graduates, right? That's what our outcome is. But every one of our institutions has a different culture and different ways that we divide up the work, different rules that we work in, and even subcomponents of our institutions. I mean, you can think of this as a multidimensional pyramid if you'd like, where we've got our admissions and records office, we've got our faculty senate, we've got individual departments. Those are all sort of sub-communities with that, with again those different written and unwritten rules for all of the activities that we engage in. So it's important to recognize that. Aaron, if you would, the next slide.
Yeah.
So again, just sort of reiterating the different components, right? We've got students that are coming in, they're trying to get an education. The community is that overall university or even subcultures within that university, and we're trying to get there. So it's important to understand that if we really want to get a change in our outcomes, it can't just focus in on the tools. I mean, I know we've been kind of talking about innovation, and I know we've sort of sold this as technology, but if we're going to be successful in bringing in that new technology, we have to focus in on those other things as well. It can't just be that one component.
I completely agree with Eric. And like I said, through our conversations over the last couple of weeks developing this out, while we pitch this as a shift in culture and technology, really focusing in on culture, because while technology and some other factors are important and can be steps along the way to increase your opportunity for success, that's all they are. They're not the impetus by which you need to change. And I think that's where we really talk about, how everybody's working together, and then working together as a team to really solve as a culture to help meet your outcomes, your purpose. And like the pyramid and what this model is showing, our purpose is to help people change their lives, upward social and economic mobility. And that's what we're doing through education. I don't know if there's anything else you want to throw onto that, Eric.
Well, I know we're going to get into this in sort of the next slide as well, but talking about how our cultures change. There's a tool we use for curriculum management right now that at the time that we purchased it was fantastic. It did everything that we asked of it. It was a good tool for the time. But frankly, the rules that we work in now have changed. And so now we're looking, Sierra College, we're going through starting the process. We've got our RFPs out and all that good stuff because we're looking at different software solutions because the one that we had, it's no longer meeting that need. So, it's understanding that as our culture changes, the other things change, that's going to have effects on the tools and vice versa.
No, that's an excellent point. I think we also face that same thing. We had a homegrown system for our learning management system, and our culture had outgrown that system. The demand from our students had outgrown that system. While it had great capabilities, what we were seeing from regular interaction, while it provided that, we wanted to add more to it. But instead of investing resources into trying to revitalize and keep the core of this program, we transitioned to Canvas. And for us, that was light years, and it was a great transition because it literally reshaped the culture of our college and how we addressed quality. So we started, why are we doing this? For quality, for this, that, and the other. While we already had great quality, we enhanced it to a whole nother level, and it really reflected in our student outcomes, which our percentage points of success went from like low 60s to now over 73% in an online environment within just a 4-year period. And so that's a really big jump. And Coastline serves around 83% at a distance. So it wasn't a small percentage of our student population, it was a very large percentage.
That's great.
And so one of the things we wanted to really talk about is some research that was conducted over the last couple of years related to looking at culture. So what our teams have done is really looked at a variety of literature to say, what are the common factors and themes that have come out of different models of innovation? And what does that look like to a culture? So reflecting across, I don't know, 20 years of data models and coming up with 1,000 different categories to put everything into, and doing a master or monster analysis, we came up with 4 areas. The mindset, are people willing? Are they open? Are they available? Do they feel involved? And do they feel included? Looking at a variety of different factors under mindset, looking at your structure. Is your institution set up in a way that encourages innovation? It encourages others to try new things. Are there leaders in place? Are there divisions and departments in place that we can meet our students where they are? Can they support each other effectively? Can we meet these equity goals, or can we meet our purpose of our mission through that structure? Are the resources in place? Have we allocated what we have in a way that reflects our goals, reflects our purpose, reflects what we're doing? And so really in the models that we looked at those different things. There's financial, human capital, facilities, the variety of technology. What different resources were identified as opportunities for that? Or are there other opportunities where they allow you to test that out? And that's where really support came in, with leadership support for testing out, trying new things, and then also having the leadership to make a decision in a timely manner. And I think that's one of the biggest factors we've seen, at least in my experience working across multiple single and multi-college institutions, is the decision making process. It's a little bit slower than we would always love it to be, but I think if you have a culture that's rooted in your values, your purpose, your stakeholders, the decisions will not be hard to make, as you use that as your leverage point to say, how does it impact X, Y, and Z? And so that's really looking at those 4 factors. I don't know, Eric, if you'd like to jump in on this.
Well, yeah, actually, yeah. I mean, one of the things that I reflected on just as you were speaking, it's like, how do you introduce people to your culture? What are the intentional ways that you bring people on board in terms of decision making? Sierra College, again, I'm going to read one of our core values, demonstrate collaboration with all stakeholders in decision making, which of course makes the decision making process even longer. I'm not going to lie, that's the downside. But we do in a normal year do a 3-day offsite training with all of our new employees, and it involves elements of equity, but it also involves a lot of introduction to sort of the interest-based approach to decision making. And because that's very important for us, we want to make sure that we've got that collaboration in place, getting back to our core values, so that we can introduce new individuals to our culture so they understand why we do things the way that we do them, and ultimately the purpose behind them, right? So we can help shape what their mindset is. We can explain the structures. We can talk about the resources that are in place for people to make those decisions and collaborate within our participatory governance structures, and show them where support are. So it's like, what are you doing? What is your college doing to help people, embed into your culture?
And I think that's a really good gauge and a great approach, Eric, is how do you look at your institution through these variety of lenses? And are you ready? And I think that's where the purpose of our work was determining your level of readiness for change, for a decision, for a movement. And so I'm going to move us on a little bit. As I just checked our time. Eric and I could talk about this all day.
Absolutely.
But we wanted to say, like, there's been a great approaches that we've taken, other institutions taken to understand that culture is through a survey. But I think it has to go beyond a survey, and really triangulating and blending those information, those stories. A survey can only give you a surface level understanding of what that is, but really grasping the depth of where your institution is gone through a variety of different ways. I really find that observations, watching why things are occurring a certain way, is, yes, very time consuming, but has been very helpful in some of the changes that we've gone through. Going through just beta tests, like with students, through a variety of different ideas and initiatives, and even with employees that we've tried to bring on. Is this intuitive? Is this helpful? And I really feel focus groups through appreciative inquiry to look at what's working. Why do you like working here? Or, why do you like going to school here? Like, what can we do to enhance that experience? And really also representing the non-participant perspective. When you bring somebody in, similar to what Eric has alluded to, where they bring employees in for that retreat to teach them, to hear about the college, also grasping that input on their perspective of things. Because sometimes when you're so rooted in your culture, your operations, your processes, sometimes you may lose that outside perspective or that objective lens on things. And something that may be blatantly obvious, I do it here and there, that someone may come in and be like, hey, did you consider, or would you point out? And that's where you have that diverse perspective. And so we always encourage, don't just have the same people sitting at the table trying to solve the same problem. Because typically, like I said, they'll all go back to their roots or maybe identify a few things. But if you bring in that diverse perspective, it really helps reshape that thought process. Go ahead, Eric. Is there anything you want to add?
Well, I mean, maybe just even getting into the next couple in terms of examining wins and failures. With Sierra College, as we started to implement guided pathways a couple of years ago, brought in an external consultant, and we did a pre-mortem. So, before we even had started our implementation, we got a lot of people in the room. I'm not sure how many, probably 200. So the majority of our full-time faculty, most of our managers, many of our classified leaders, and talked about, okay, we're going to go down this path. We have decided intentionally we are going to adopt guided pathways. We're going to do this. Now, what are the things that we think are going to go wrong? And so that we could start to address them ahead of time, right? We know some of the things that are going to cause us angst. Division of labor. Who makes this decision? Is it the academic senate? Is it the management? Is it facilities that makes these decisions, right? So figuring these things out ahead of time, as many as we can, right? Because we always know there are unknown unknowns, but let's try to address those known unknowns as much as we possibly can.
Exactly. It's almost like when you go on a trip and you obviously check the weather before you go to Disneyland or you go to the beach. You don't want it to be raining. Well, maybe at Disneyland you do so you can get on all the rides. But those are some of the things that you can, kind of weigh out your options and really look at that. And before we go into this next slide, I really wanted you to maybe touch on intentionality. I think you touched on that earlier in our talk, but really
Yeah.
things through intention.
Well, I mean, so figuring out how you're going to use things, what you're going to do with tools, and so very specifically for Sierra College, we have implemented analytics with Hobson's Starfish Analytics. We're about a year and a half in to that implementation. Before we began, as part of Hobson's approach, we had focus groups. We had people come in and we did a self-evaluation of where we thought we were going to be for the implementation. Hobson's did their own evaluation. We compared those notes, and we made some decisions specifically about how we were going to use that tool. We saw the shiny presentation from the vendor. Actually, it was a really shiny presentation. It was great. But this really got us a chance to think through, okay, how are we going to use this? Who is going to use it? What are the new rules that we might need to set up in terms of who's going to be allowed to see some of that data? Because we're making predictions about student behavior. We're making predictions about behavior in departments. Let's talk about the implications of all that, right? So we had very intentional discussions before we implemented this new technology tool.
Excellent. And I think that's a key component is just don't just make the decision off the cuff. You know, have some discussion, have some dialogue, look at the purpose. And once again, what are you trying to achieve with the decision you're making and who is it going to impact? Remember, I think as we go through this, I think we already just jumped into that is we don't just want to run in with the decision we're doing X. With certain aspects we can do that, but it's gone through levels of dialogue and discussion by which the decision has been made. You know, does this align with our goals? Does this align with our values? Do we see that this is going to make a positive impact on students or on our community? And really sharing that message, because I think that the biggest challenge is what we see a lot is the decision is made by few, but never described why. Even to the point of when we're giving out a survey. I was asked the other day, we're doing a PACE climate survey of just understanding our structures and the like. And the question was before we send it out is, how are we going to get people to take this? And it's really the thought process was we want to describe the purpose and the reason why we're doing it. And so if you have purpose behind things and how it ties to things that will impact our students, our stakeholders, our community, our employees, and then also how it ties back to our mission and core values, I think those are the key components of how those type of initiatives such as what we're doing is going to help be more robust and more effective. Now if you want to share something from this list, Eric.
Oh gosh, I don't know. One of the things I think that's been valuable for us in terms of getting to guided pathways, in terms of cross-functional collaboration. Again, not really a technology piece per se, but making sure that we had good conversation between student services and instruction. Because hey, we have meetings together, right? Deans have meetings together. It's great. We do it once a week, but we never really talked about how the decisions one group would make would impact another. And that eventually led us to actually a business process analysis, BPA, about both our class scheduling and curriculum development process, which eventually led us to purchasing some software, which is why we're here. But it was really clear that in understanding how everything was going, every single division, every single academic division made different decisions about scheduling. And generally they did them, for good reasons. But often those reasons were maybe not tied towards our sort of top goals and top values. And so it forced us to, one, realize maybe we need to be more consistent with our scheduling, but two, we are being inefficient. Let's figure out what tool is going to help us be more efficient and bring in more input so that we get the best possible outcomes in our schedule and our curriculum.
And I think you bring up a great point. Well, we have our title of our presentation of it's built in our culture and our technology. Technology was a tool to help you get there, but it was really rooted in the decision that you had based on your core decision of how are we helping students and really, making the changes in their lives to be and helping our institution become more effective. So with that, we just want to tie back to the whole theme of this is, remember your core. keep your values in mind. Ensure that which decisions you make, who it's affecting and who it's impacting, who is being involved and who's being left out. That's a big factor that we want to always consider. And then also, are you meeting your purpose and having that shared purpose that everybody can get behind? And once you have established that, you can easily move your institution forward through a variety of different ways. And like I said, just stick to those key values, and like I said, you'll be a bit more successful along the way. I don't know, Eric, if you have any final words.
Yeah, always keep it in mind. Even if people can't articulate the exact words of your mission statement, does everybody have that shared understanding that our mission is to help students succeed? Is our, people understand that we have a mission to make sure we've got equitable outcomes? Even if they can't articulate the mission, do people understand the gist of it? And that goes a long way to keep that in mind, as Aaron was saying. So keep it in
Excellent.
mind.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everybody, and hopefully have some time for a few questions. Appreciate your time. Thank you again. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Aaron. Thank you all for paying attention and listening in with us.
Thanks. I think I stopped the recording. Nope.
It's still going.